these doors enter the world's future astronauts, scientists, and engineers. Be the future. Space Camp.
Welcome to Aviation Challenge, the elite aerial training facility where young cadets fly flight simulators, hone their teamwork and survival skills, and learn from the artifacts of the past what it takes to be a real pilot. Cadet curriculum is designed for their age and grade level. Mach 1 learn the basics, Mach 2 go a little deeper and faster in their instruction, and by Mach 3, cadets must soar higher than ever to achieve success. In the Sims bays, cadets engage in simulated missions, sometimes against each other. It is in these real-life mission scenarios where their critical thinking and communication skills are put to the greatest test. If they hope to be named Top Gun, they must put their all into their missions. When not flying, cadets are learning about aeronautic history and engineering. Everything on the Aviation Challenge campus is designed for instruction. To be the best pilot, cadets need to know about aircraft and how they work. The historic aircraft on-site teach cadets the principles of flight they need to apply to their simulated missions. Each aircraft has a unique story and assumed different roles in their military service. The rotorcraft on display demonstrate the diversity among Aviation Challenge's historic aircraft. The Bell H-1 Cobra was a two-place, single-engine attack helicopter used by the U.S. Army. It was capable of land or sea-based operations and was utilized primarily for close air support, protecting troops on the ground. While the Bell UH-1C and the SH-2 Sea Sprite were utility helicopters used primarily for troop transport, however both served attack functions. The UH-1C was developed as a gunship version of the original Bell UH-1 until the interim attack helicopter, the Bell UH-1G, was available. Meanwhile, the Sea Sprite served the U.S. Navy for over 3 decades by assisting with anti-submarine warfare. The planes at Aviation Challenge are even more diverse in their history. The T-38 Talon is a twin-engine, high-altitude, supersonic jet trainer still in use to this day. It is highly reliable and has an exceptional safety record, making it ideal for training Air Force pilots and even NASA astronauts. Among the planes at Aviation Challenge are 2 attack aircraft, the A-7 Corsair II and the AV-8B Harrier. An attack aircraft is a military aircraft designed and armed for attacking the enemy's ground forces from above. These 2 aircraft performed this role, among others, throughout numerous conflicts, with the Corsair serving the Navy and Air Force and the Harrier the Marine Corps. Then there are the 5 fighter aircraft, demonstrating the history of aerial combat. This begins with the MiG-17. It was the first Soviet-built fighter to have an afterburning engine that allowed it to achieve Mach 1 in level flight. Of the MiG-17's many variations, the MiG-17 PF on display was the Soviet Union's first missile-armed interceptor, or a fighter designed for intercepting and defeating invading fighters. Another interceptor on display at Aviation Challenge is the F-14A Tomcat. The Tomcat was a supersonic, twin-engine, variable sweep-wing, 2-seat fighter designed for the U.S. Navy. It was designed to attack and destroy enemy aircraft at both day and night and in all weather conditions. The F-14 was very versatile, capable of precision strikes and tactical reconnaissance, as well as traditional air-to-air combat, and served as the U.S. Navy's primary maritime air superiority fighter till its retirement in the mid-2000s. While many of the fighter aircraft served multiple functions, most of the aircraft were engineered for a specific task. In particular, 2 of the fighters were fighter bombers, the F-111 Aardvark and the F-4C Phantom II. The Aardvark was used by the Air Force, and the Phantom was used by the Navy and eventually the Air Force as well. Both aircraft could carry nuclear weapons and were used for interdiction and recon, with the Phantom also acting as an interceptor in combat. Finally, there is the F-16 Fighting Falcon, also called the Viper. It is the only plane on-site still actively used by the United States military. It is a multi-role fighter and is the primary fighter for the U.S. Air Force. It is capable of performing a variety of missions including air-to-air combat, air-to-ground combat, tactical recon, surface-to-air missile suppression, and close air support. This particular F-16B is marked with a red tail honoring the Tuskegee Airmen. the African-American fighter pilots of World War II, who were trained in Tuskegee, Alabama, and provided exceptional fighter protection to bombers in the European theater. While understanding one's aircraft is of great importance, cadets must also be prepared for all outcomes. That is where their survival training begins. They must prove their mettle in being able to build a fire and create a shelter. They must also demonstrate proficiency in surviving scenarios involving water. These scenarios include the helo dunker and the water zip line. Cadets are submerged inside the helo dunker, demonstrating what it is like to escape a sinking helicopter. While our older, Mach 3 cadets experience what it is like to parachute down into the water with the water zip line. At the end of their week of training, the Aviation Challenge cadets compete head-on in the Top Gun competition to see who is the best fighter pilot among them. They then graduate and get their Aviation Challenge wings. Cadets can then return the following year for further training, or come back as an instructor and crew trainer to help educate the next generation. Discover your mission at Aviation Challenge.
Beginning launch operations. Controllers, go, no-go callouts.
Adventure. Go. Wonder.
Go!
Imagination. Go. Excitement.
Go!
We are go for launch.
Launch your imagination in Huntsville, Alabama at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, home of Space Camp.
Wow.
Discover a world of wow in Huntsville, Alabama at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, home of Space Camp.
very excited to share this exhibit, which showcases all 5 of the very successful missions that have explored the Martian surface. These rovers are on display to us from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. However, I want to say that we created this exhibit in-house.
So the exhibit is called Discovering Mars, Robot Explorers. In terms of kind of curating the exhibit, you want to understand what your theme is. Then you start looking around at the materials that we have in our collection and the materials that are available to us to borrow, and sort of working to kind of bring those pieces together and making sure that you can get a cohesive narrative.
First thing I want to do is make it more immersive, put them in the space. So what I want to do is create a Mars environment where the rovers would sit and live, and you can kind of imagine yourself being on Mars with the rovers. Being part of the museum is not just talking about history, but it's also inspiring people to think about the future and what has come and what they can do. You can be part of that mission to get people on Mars, and this hopefully inspires them to say, okay, this is the first step. What can I do to help get people on Mars? Maybe I can go to Mars myself.
Go Mars!
Through these doors enter the world's future astronauts, scientists, and engineers. Be the future. Space Camp.
Welcome to Aviation Challenge, the elite aerial training facility where young cadets fly flight simulators, hone their teamwork and survival skills, and learn from the artifacts of the past what it takes to be a real pilot. Cadet curriculum is designed for their age and grade level. Mach 1 learn the basics, Mach 2 go a little deeper and faster in their instruction, and by Mach 3, cadets must soar higher than ever to achieve success. In the Sims bays, cadets engage in simulated missions, sometimes against each other. It is in these real-life mission scenarios where their critical thinking and communication skills are put to the greatest test. If they hope to be named Top Gun, they must put their all into their missions. When not flying, cadets are learning about aeronautic history and engineering. Everything on the Aviation Challenge campus is designed for instruction. To be the best pilot, cadets need to know about aircraft and how they work. The historic aircraft on-site teach cadets the principles of flight they need to apply to their simulated missions. Each aircraft has a unique story and assumed different roles in their military service. The rotorcraft on display demonstrate the diversity among Aviation Challenge's historic aircraft. The Bell H-1 Cobra was a two-place, single-engine attack helicopter used by the U.S. Army. It was capable of land or sea-based operations and was utilized primarily for close air support, protecting troops on the ground. While the Bell UH-1C and the SH-2 Sea Sprite were utility helicopters used primarily for troop transport, however both served attack functions. The UH-1C was developed as a gunship version of the original Bell UH-1 until the interim attack helicopter, the Bell UH-1G, was available. Meanwhile, the Sea Sprite served the U.S. Navy for over 3 decades by assisting with anti-submarine warfare. The planes at Aviation Challenge are even more diverse in their history. The T-38 Talon is a twin-engine, high-altitude, supersonic jet trainer still in use to this day. It is highly reliable and has an exceptional safety record, making it ideal for training Air Force pilots and even NASA astronauts. Among the planes at Aviation Challenge are 2 attack aircraft, the A-7 Corsair II and the AV-8B Harrier. An attack aircraft is a military aircraft designed and armed for attacking the enemy's ground forces from above. These 2 aircraft performed this role, among others, throughout numerous conflicts, with the Corsair serving the Navy and Air Force and the Harrier the Marine Corps. Then there are the 5 fighter aircraft, demonstrating the history of aerial combat. This begins with the MiG-17. It was the first Soviet-built fighter to have an afterburning engine that allowed it to achieve Mach 1 in level flight. Of the MiG-17's many variations, the MiG-17 PF on display was the Soviet Union's first missile-armed interceptor, or a fighter designed for intercepting and defeating invading fighters. Another interceptor on display at Aviation Challenge is the F-14A Tomcat. The Tomcat was a supersonic, twin-engine, variable sweep wing, two-seat fighter designed for the U.S. Navy. It was designed to attack and destroy enemy aircraft at both day and night and in all weather conditions. The F-14 was very versatile, capable of precision strikes and tactical reconnaissance, as well as traditional air-to-air combat, and served as the U.S. Navy's primary maritime air superiority fighter till its retirement in the mid-2000s. While many of the fighter aircraft served multiple functions, most of the aircraft were engineered for a specific task. In particular, two of the fighters were fighter bombers, the F-111 Aardvark and the F-4C Phantom II. The Aardvark was used by the Air Force, and the Phantom was used by the Navy and eventually the Air Force as well. Both aircraft could carry nuclear weapons and were used for interdiction and recon, with the Phantom also acting as an interceptor in combat. Finally, there is the F-16 Fighting Falcon, also called the Viper. It is the only plane on site still actively used by the United States military. It is a multi-role fighter and is the primary fighter for the U.S. Air Force. It is capable of performing a variety of missions including air-to-air combat, air-to-ground combat, tactical recon, surface-to-air missile suppression, and close air support. This particular F-16B is marked with a red tail honoring the Tuskegee Airmen, the African-American fighter pilots of World War II, who were trained in Tuskegee, Alabama, and provided exceptional fighter protection to bombers in the European theater. While understanding one's aircraft is of great importance, cadets must also be prepared for all outcomes. That is where their survival training begins. They must prove their mettle in being able to build a fire and create a shelter. They must also demonstrate proficiency in surviving scenarios involving water. These scenarios include the helo dunker and the water zip line. Cadets are submerged inside the helo dunker, demonstrating what it is like to escape a sinking helicopter. While our older, Mach 3 cadets experience what it is like to parachute down into the water with the water zip line. At the end of their week of training, the Aviation Challenge cadets compete head-on in the Top Gun competition to see who is the best fighter pilot among them. They then graduate and get their Aviation Challenge wings. Cadets can then return the following year for further training, or come back as an instructor and crew trainer to help educate the next generation. Discover your mission at Aviation Challenge.
Beginning launch operations. Controllers, go, no-go callouts.
Adventure. Go. Wonder.
Go!
Imagination. Go. Excitement.
Go!
We are go for launch.
Launch your imagination in Huntsville, Alabama at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, home of Space Camp.
Discover a world of wow in Huntsville, Alabama at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, home of Space Camp.
Well, good morning. I'm Kay Taylor, Vice President of Education at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. Thank you for joining us. Today, we have a special opportunity to host a downlink with astronauts on board the International Space Station. Astronauts Johnny Kim, Ann McCain, and Nicole Ayers have received pre-recorded questions from students at Space Camp and the Rocket Center, and will share with us what it's like to live and work in space. Today also marks the 65th anniversary of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. From launching the Saturn V rocket that first took humans to the moon, to the Space Launch System and advances in propulsion, Marshall plays an important role in space exploration, including managing the science that's conducted on the International Space Station. For over 2 decades, scientist astronauts have pursued science and has led to advances in drug therapies, has expanded our knowledge of the effects of long-duration space flight on the human body, and has even pioneered a new field, space agriculture. But at this time, I'd like to turn the microphone over to 2 individuals who work at Marshall's Payloads Operations Integration Center, or POC, to share with you Marshall's role in managing the science on board the International Space Station. Please welcome Penny Pettigrew and Kevin Wall to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. As Kay said, my name is Penny, and this is Kellen, and we both work at the Payload Operations Center out at the Marshall Space Flight Center, which is right down the road behind the trees that line the back of the Space Camp property.
Hello, museum guests. Please join us in the Saturn V Hall and the Davidson Center at 11:50 for a chance to talk to the astronauts on the ISS.
Okay, you're already here, so you have a head start. I am a Payload Communications Manager, or a PACOM, which really means that I am the person in the room who gets to talk to the astronauts on the space station and help them do their science experiments.
I am a Payload Rack Officer, or PRO. We're kind of the resource manager for all of the payloads, so we're giving the power to the payloads, the thermal cooling, vacuum resources, and just nitrogen, and helping monitor all the payloads while the scientists around the world are not supporting.
This is a look at our building. This is out at Marshall Space Flight Center. This is where our control center resides. And this is what it looks like inside. Now, if you've been over to the main museum, there is a small mock-up of our control center in the Science on Orbit exhibit. So if you want to see anything up close and personal, you can check that out after the presentation. But this is what it really looks like. Just to clear up any confusion, we are not mission control. Mission control is a term most people are familiar with, but that is at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. We work hand in hand with them, supporting the astronauts on board the space station, but we are two separate control centers working together. How we are different is, as Kay said, we here in Huntsville specifically support the science that the astronauts are doing on board. At JSC in Houston, they support the space station as a facility or as a home, making sure it's a safe place for the astronauts to live and work. So, as I said, my job is to talk to the crew. If they have a question about a science experiment, they call Huntsville. If something like the toilet backs up, they call Houston. So I think we have the better end of that job. So, other than Kellen and my roles, there's a whole team of people out at POIC working together, supporting the astronauts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We work night shifts, weekends, holidays, government furloughs, COVID. We were still working every day because the astronauts were still flying. And that room has been occupied and continuously working since February of 2001. So almost 25 years that Huntsville has been supporting the space station science. And unfortunately, most folks around the country, most of the general public, has no idea that we're even here.
As Penny mentioned, there are many other control positions in the room that we work on. All their names are up there on the screen, but everyone has a specialized role to play to make sure that science is happening nonstop on board of station.
So I will say that I actually got my start, or what inspired me to do this, is when I came to Space Camp as a kid. I came to Space Camp for the first time in 1989, and that was my first experience with all the folks on the ground that help support the astronauts to be successful. You know, I grew up in the era of the shuttle, so we always saw the launches and the landings, and we always see the astronauts on TV, but we never got to see everybody else that worked with them. So coming to Space Camp as a kid is what put me on the path to where I am today, because had I not done that, I would not know what a flight controller is or what they do. And to be honest, I wouldn't know that NASA is in Huntsville, Alabama, because I'm originally from Southern California. Everybody knows about Houston and the Johnson Space Center, or the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, because that's where everything launches from, who knew NASA's in Alabama? So coming to Space Camp is literally what put me on my path to where I am today, because I literally didn't know any of this was here.
Yeah, and I have a similar but different background. I'm from Texas, so I knew all about Houston's control room. I visited it several times growing up as a kid. It wasn't until I was in college that I learned that NASA was here in Huntsville, and we do the science. And life took me here, and I've been here for 8 years and have never looked back. It's a great opportunity, and we hire folks from all backgrounds, not just engineers, not just scientists. There's control positions coming from all over.
For example, as a PACOM, like I said, my job is to talk to the astronauts. So we have several folks who are communications majors as opposed to science and engineering. We actually had one PACOM who used to be a second grade teacher. So just think about it. If you can get second graders to do what you want them to do, you can get astronauts to do what you want them to do. So they do kind of align, even though it doesn't look like or sound like it might. So we have been getting the notice that we are getting close to our live event. So we want to give the folks here at the Rocket Center time to get everything in order. I hope you learned something. I hope you're excited about today's event. The current ISS crew will be talking live with us and answering questions from space campers. I was able to give them a heads up. I was working over the weekend that we would be here during this event. So hopefully, they'll have a lot of fun things to tell us and to show us and demonstrating how cool microgravity is. Thank you guys very much for being here today.
Beam into us, so if you'll bear with us, we're waiting for our guest of honor. We're about 250 miles in space.
And then copy your item right there. We need to start the PO events, and PO is good with going without that, so we'll just go without the SSC for right now. Sorry about that. And with that, station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston Station, we're ready for the event.
Houston ACR, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Houston ACR. How do you hear me?
We have you loud and clear.
We've got you loud and clear as well. Please stand by for opening comments.
Hello, I'm Robin Soprano, Vice President of Space Camp at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Every year, thousands of young people from around the world come to the Rocket Center and Space Camp to train like astronauts and launch their futures in STEM-related fields. Today, some of our Space Camp trainees had the incredible opportunity to speak with an astronaut currently aboard the ISS. Thank you for joining us. Let's begin the conversation.
Hi, my name is John, and my question is, what is a typical day in space for you? How do you spend your time?
Hey, welcome aboard the International Space Station to all of those at Space Camp. And like your John, I like your question to start off. So typical day, it's pretty common to have someone just kind of floating around upside down next to you. We run on the wall and we lift weights on the wall, and a lot of things are on the ceiling. So that's pretty typical. But, we live kind of like you guys do. We have a schedule. We go to work every day, and we work from about 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. or so with some time for lunch. We do a lot of science on board. We do a lot of maintenance as well. We're the plumbers and electricians up here, and we live our daily lives kind of working through to maintain the International Space Station and get all the science done up here.
Hi, my name is Wyatt. My question is, have you ever talked to the Marshall Space Flight Center's Payload Operations Center?
Hey Wyatt, we talk to Marshall all the time. We call them Huntsville for short, and they're one of our biggest support teams. We operate with them every single day, and a lot of our science experiments kind of start at the epicenter of Huntsville, where they walk us through procedures and have experts standing by to answer any questions we might have. So we couldn't do our daily jobs without Huntsville's support.
Hello, my name is Raylan, and my question is, have there ever been insects or animals on the space station?
Hey, Raylan, the answer to that is yes. We have used insects for different types of research because if you think about it, we don't actually send up very many astronauts. So for the scientists, we are kind of called statistically insignificant. We're really low numbers when they research on us. But when you have little tiny insects, we can send a whole ton of them. So I'm going to give you a really cool example of some that we have right here. And I'm going to ask one of my crewmates to take it up to the camera and show you. These are fruit flies, and these were recently flown by Hunor, which is a Hungarian in orbit, which is a new country that's participating in research aboard the International Space Station. And Hungary flew these fruit flies to investigate how radiation impacts the body, like a living organism. So they have some fruit flies that were born on Earth, and they're here, and then they have some fruit flies that are going to be born during this mission. And they're going to look at the differences in the enzymes in the bodies of the fruit flies to see if there's any difference for the ones that were born in gravity or off gravity. So this is just one of the examples, and this can tell us a lot about how our human body would react to radiation and microgravity over a long period of time.
Hi, my name is Rhea, and my question is, did going to space camp prepare you for going to space?
Hey, Ray, actually, my middle name is spelled just like your first name, so I had to have a shout out for your name. But yes, I think that going to space camp as a kid really inspired me. I knew what space was, and I knew there were astronauts, but I got to really learn kind of what a day in the life looks like, what training might look like. I think the
the most core memory for me is actually the zero gravity wall, if they still have it around, where they hook you up and you get to spend, I think it was like 30 or 40 minutes on this wall. And, a lot of people spend time building or doing other things. And man, I just spent the whole time like jumping from the ground and floating all the way up all 3 stories and then climbing back down and jumping again. So, I was really inspired by everything that I got to learn there and see. And, it really boosted my motivation to try to get here one day.
Hi, my name is Prince, and my question is, what does the space station sound like? Is it noisy with all the experiments, or is it quiet?
So Space Station has a lot of noises. So we kind of have a continuous background noise of all the various different fans and environmental control systems that are ongoing at any given time. And then in addition to that, if we're running specific experiments, those experiments can have additional hardware that causes a lot of extra noises. So at any given time, we're kind of always surrounded by a lot of noise, but you do get used to it. And we have crew quarters where we get to spend some of our personal time and where we sleep. And those crew quarters are protected pretty well with sound dampening walls that give us a little bit of peace and quiet at the end of the day.
Hi, my name is Caden, and my question is, what has been the coolest thing you've seen so far out of the cupola window?
I think my favorite thing to look at the cupola window are the auroras, and especially when you're, over an area of the world at nighttime and there's like a thunderstorm, which kind of looks like some fireworks coming off of Earth, and then you see this aurora built. For those of you that haven't seen an aurora, and if you live like kind of in the southern half of the United States, you may not have seen one. But an aurora is this amazing green hue that comes off of the poles usually during like a period of high solar activity. So when the sun is shooting lots of particles at us, like little bullets, those little bullets come down and they hit the Earth's magnetic field, which accelerates those little magnetic particles to the poles, and they react with these oxygen molecules, and it creates this green aurora that's also sometimes red and sometimes pink and sometimes all different colors. So definitely while you're at space camp, ask some of the instructors to show you what auroras look like from the space station. My other favorite part of that is that usually everyone is in the cupola at the same time looking at them.
Hi, my name is Gabriella, and my questions are, what kind of health-related research are you doing right now? And do you think we will have any new medications or treatments from it?
Hey, Gabriella, that's a really interesting question. Actually, we just finished an experiment called the ring shear drop. So they're looking at protein crystals and the way that they shear or break right where the surface of water or liquid meets the air. And so this is actually going to help inform the way that we do medication for things like cancer, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. So they're actually building these computer models to help model how those proteins shear and break, and it'll help us build medications. So it's actually a really interesting experiment that we just wrapped up here.
Hi, my name is Declan, and my question is, have you taken any pictures from the cupola windows, and what happens to those photos?
Yeah, one of our favorite activities, Declan, is to take photos from the amazing windows we have. Cupola offers us a perspective like none other. And my friend Ann here and Vapor have 2 of the cameras that we have on board. These particular models are digital cameras, and they have these really powerful lenses at the end of them that enable us to zoom to great lengths and also bring in a lot of extra light in so that we can take really crisp, clear photos even in the darkest of conditions.
Hi, my name is Brooks, and my question is, what specific skills do you need for this mission?
I would say that the biggest skill that you need is being able to adapt to a lot of different requirements. So we talk about soft skills and hard skills. So we need technical skills where we know how to put cables onto boxes. We understand how to do some troubleshooting on mechanical systems like air conditioning or computers, things like that. And then we also talk about soft skills. The three of us have been together for a few months, and if you think about a couple of the people in your class and just imagine being in a closed compartment with them for 3 months, all the things that may come up and the conversations that you'll have, and I probably annoyed my crewmates more than once. And so we got to talk through those things because we have to accomplish the mission together. And so that's what we call soft skills, just the ability to communicate through things. And being able to adapt from situation to situation is really important. So when you're at Space Camp this week, what I want you to do is you're going to get classes and shown a lot of different things, a lot of different opportunities to do a lot of really cool things. And they're all going to be really different. And really, that's kind of what we're doing up here. It's a lot of different skills required and the ability to adapt and understand each situation and what skills to apply to each situation.
Hi, my name is Jada, and my question is, how did you become an astronaut?
Hey, Jada. So for me, like I said, I really loved space and flying when I was little. And, you know, the shuttle was still flying when we were growing up. And so as soon as I found out that you could fly the shuttle, I was like, ooh, that's what I want to do. I want to be a pilot and I want to fly this thing. And, you know, I went to Space Camp, which really inspired me. I loved my time at Space Camp. And that kind of sealed the deal on what I wanted to do. And I was kind of a serious little kid and set some really high goals and just started working towards that path. But, you know, as I started to do those things, I fell in love with flying and I fell in love with math and I fell in love with learning. And so doing the things that you're passionate about, I think, is the biggest and the most important thing that you can do to get where we are here today. So find something that you're passionate about, work really hard at it, and be a good team player, and you could be up here one day.
Hi, my name is Yash, and my question is, can you drink your morning coffee in space?
Gosh, that's a resounding yes. You can definitely drink your morning coffee in space. And Anne here has 2 drink bags, and we're going to demonstrate how fluids can react in microgravity. And so Anne's going to take a little bit of water out, and you can see that it's just kind of floating on the tip of the straw. And because we're in a weightless environment, as soon as we kind of discharge a little bit of water, it'll float, and it takes the shape of a sphere because that's the lowest energy form when you're in a microgravity environment. Thanks, Anne.
Hi, my name is Lyra, and my question is, what was the hardest challenge you had to face to get to space?
I think for me the hardest challenge was the amount of things that you have to learn before you can come to space. I was ready to come to space when I was like 5, but NASA didn't think I was quite ready yet. So I had to spend a lot of years in school, and then I had to figure out kind of what path I wanted to take. If you want to be an astronaut, there's so many different paths that you can take. You know, you can be a pilot, you can be a scientist, you can be a doctor, you can be a geologist and spend time out like looking at rocks and thinking about the origin of the universe, or an astronomer and looking deep into space and wondering like where are we in the universe. There's so many different paths that you can take. I picked my path of being a pilot and an engineer, and they still didn't think I was ready to be an astronaut when I was 20. So, you know, I had to keep going and keep flying, getting more experience and leadership experience. So I think for me, really the hardest part was, number 1, the wait, and number 2, believing in a dream that seems so far out there and that you don't necessarily see a lot of other people doing. And so my advice to you would be to be really unrealistic about your dreams, but be very realistic about your path. And believe that if you do something every single day to work toward your dreams, that it can come true one day. And I know it's going to be hard to be patient, but it's going to be worth it.
Hi, my name is Mason. My question is, how long does it take to put on your spacesuit?
Hey, Mason. Well, it actually takes quite a while to put on your spacesuit. You know, Ann and I did a spacewalk in May, and Johnny helped suit us up, actually. So Taka and Johnny, our two other crewmates, were in the crew lock with us, getting us suited up. So we started our day at like 6 a.m., and we have to do a pre-breathe. So we have to put masks on our face and breathe 100% oxygen. And we have to do that for several hours in order to prevent the decompression sickness from the pressure changes in the suit. So we actually started the day super early, and we were out there at about 6, and then we started to get into the suits probably around 7:30, and it takes a couple hours because we both have to get in. You know, you put the pant legs on kind of like pants, but they're these massive pants, and you know, on Earth the whole spacesuit weighs about 300 pounds. So we have to have somebody else help us get in there, and then we have to get into the upper torso portion. We have to get our gloves on, we have to get the helmet on. Everything has to be sealed perfectly. And then we have a MEDOX chamber, that's a chamber that in the suit that will scrub the CO2, and we have to change that out. So that's a very particular procedure. So by the time that we actually get into the airlock and open the hatch and go out into space, we've actually been at work for like 6 or 7 hours, and just to get ready and get into the suits. So it's a pretty long process, but it's well worth it to get out the door.
Hi, my name is Noah, and my question is, are there any planes going on the space station right now?
Hey, Noah, actually there are, and we're going to demonstrate one for you. This is our friend Pete. He's a peanut plant, and he's growing on the space station. And what's interesting about plants is that, you know, plants take a lot of signals when they're on Earth. They not only use the sense of gravity, but also the direction of the sun. And so because being in a weightless environment, it's a little bit different. But Pete's been growing out okay, and we take good care of him.
Hi, my name is Giovanni, and my question is, what do you do for fun in your downtime?
I'm glad you asked this, because we do have a lot of fun in our downtime. And on my first flight, I got the advice that, hey, if it would entertain someone who is 10 years old, it will entertain you as an adult. And that is so true. So I'm guessing that some of you might be younger than 10 or about 10, and some of you guys are older, but kind of what you think is fun, we think is fun. So we play games. We have a mesh bag full of balls that we've got, like baseballs and ping pong balls and a rugby ball. We'll throw those around. We try to get creative with our floating. So we like to see how far we can go through a module floating without kicking something. We like talking to each other, even though we see each other every single day. We actually do enjoy talking to each other and catching up on days and catching up on people's families on Earth. We like movie nights. That's a highlight here. And then we like to get creative with our food. And I think the most creative we got on this mission was making space sushi. We tried to find some different fish and tuna and some Spam, and put it on little pieces of rice, and then we tried to keep it sticky. It was a little bit of a mess, but it tasted pretty good.
Hi, my name is Matthew, and my question is it hard to exercise in space?
Hey, Matthew, that's a great question. You know, exercise is really important for us because without the gravity, your bones and your muscles start to deteriorate. You know, your body's like, oh, we don't need to fight against the force of gravity anymore. So it starts to get rid of your muscle mass and your bone density. So we do exercise every single day, but it's not too tough. You know, running in space, you know, you don't really get a good workout if you just move your legs, right? So you got to have some sort of way to simulate the weight. So we'll put a harness on and attach it to a bungee to hold us down on the treadmill. And then we have this really cool machine called ARED. It's a resistive device. It uses a lot of really cool physics. So it's got vacuum chambers in there to create the resistance, and it actually causes a constant resistance the whole time. So you can actually do squats with resistance, and it feels kind of like a normal squat bar. So there have been a lot of really brilliant engineers and scientists who came up with how exactly we're going to do exercise on the space station.
Hi, my name is Henry, and my question is, what happens if you get sick in space?
It's a great question. So Ann here is demonstrating what we call an emesis bag, and if we get really, really sick, we can put this up against our face, and hopefully it captures all of the contents of whatever we had for breakfast that day. But normally that doesn't happen. The times when people feel sick is when they first get to the space station. It's a brand new environment, and your brain is going, your whole body and your brain is undergoing a lot of adaptations to this new environment. So you can feel sick. I know I personally felt quite sick for the first couple of days. Other than that, if there's any kinds of illnesses that might happen on the space station, we do have crew medical officers, we have doctors at Mission Control Houston that are standing by, and we have an assortment of medication that Vapor here is showing you.
Thank you to the crew on the ISS. Your work drives our scientific progress, fuels future missions, and delivers benefits back here on Earth. And to our Space Camp trainees, thank you for your thoughtful questions and boundless curiosity. And happy anniversary to NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
Great day.